hear me well?
I can hear you fine, yeah.
Hey, Colin, really excited to have you here. I've always said to everyone that if there is one company I would work for, not from Goldcast, it's Salesforce, right? Because it's one of the iconic SaaS companies that has ever been built. So, and you have sort of played a very pivotal role in building the brand of Salesforce. So, really excited to have you here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Before we start, since you actually own Dreamforce, a program, I want to play one quick video about Dreamforce so that people know the scale of the kinds of programs you start with. Uh,
20 years ago, the rule was, the business of business is business. But that didn't truck so well with a bold group of trailblazers who decided to cut against the grain. Nope, no way, no how was the refrain. You see, something's missing from this equation. Now's the time to rise from this fever dream and let ourselves renegotiate the non-negotiable. Yeah, you see, we gotta find our frequency. Come together and find our center. Like that, Dreamforce was born. 2 decades later, while some businesses continue to navel gaze, it's the same old dance and song. Some look away to other places and their empty displays. Well, we say it's time for an even better verse, where customers and planet are at the center. Now hear me out. What if there was a place where values are the operating system and innovation is the code? A place created by and for trailblazers, where there's always a seat at the table for the willing and the able. A place where trust is earned at hello and howdy. Empowered with the platform to navigate the horizon of a new economy. Connections become magical, genuine, one-to-one, not one-size-fits-all, so that relationships run deep and bloom into wow. Customer success, that's our North Star. Paradise, once lost, is found. No, you see, the business of business is so much more than business. I want to thank you all for making this world better, for coming together and always finding our center. Those are green lights up ahead, trailblazers. You see them?
It's a very powerful video, and also Matthew, his voice is pretty good, right? It feels very soothing, it feels like he's born out of thin air. It's amazing his voice can do. But
I'm ready after watching. I haven't watched that video since September, so it's good to be. It feels like I'm back at Dreamforce. And there's a reason why he's an A-list celebrity, because he's pretty damn good at his job. So yeah, we're lucky to have him.
Exactly. No, awesome, Colin. Good to have you here. Before we start with, I think one thing that I found very fascinating about your journey was that, and I've not had this before. You were a Formula One race car driver for 10-15 years before joining Salesforce, right? And what's fascinating to me is that somebody took a bet on you to join Salesforce, right? It's not obvious that somebody can hire a Formula One race driver to run marketing at Salesforce. So we just want to hear about that journey in terms of what exactly happened there and who actually took a bet on you and what did that story pan out?
Yeah, it's funny. I did everything in my power to not get the job at Salesforce, it felt like, and maybe for another day. Lots of fun stories there. But yeah, in a former life, I was a professional racing driver, and that's for my entire, children to teenage to early adult years. That was my number one objective. It's all I cared about. I do think it's funny how life finds its way in nonlinear journeys. It turns out that being a professional athlete is a huge marketing job. When you think about the brand you build, and racing is a very expensive sport, the amount of money that you raise. I had raised almost $20 million in personal sponsorship by the time I was 18 years old. So I spent more time in boardrooms than I did race cars. And I was part of the Red Bull energy drink program and test driver for the Formula One team, and raced in Formula 3 and World Series Renault and lots of different championships in Europe. And, there came a moment in time right around 2008 when Red Bull picked another driver over me, and it was devastating. And they picked Sebastian Vettel, who's now 4-time world champion, and they probably got that call right, to be honest with you. But it's been fun. It's been a fun journey. I decided to turn that passion that I had built into marketing. Launched Salesforce at a couple companies as I was kind of finding my way, and I fell in love with the organization, and it's all I ever cared about was wanting to be part of Salesforce. That was 12 years ago now, and it's been a fun ride, that's for sure.
That's awesome. Two documentaries that I've been very fond of is one, Last Dance. It's basically Michael Jordan's documentary, and then Drive to Survive, right, which basically introduced the Formula One sport to the American audience. Do you think what happens in the documentary is more or less true, where there's a lot of jealousy involved, across teams, within teams, and it's fast paced as they show it? Do you think it's more or less true?
I think Drive to Survive in particular is I can't speak of NBA scenarios, but for Drive to Survive, it's a very fair articulation of what the motorsports world looks like and what Formula One looks like. I mean, of course, some things are aggrandized, as any storyteller would do, as all of us as marketers would do the same thing. But it's been amazing to see what it's done to the popularity here in the US. And it just shows how important and how popular of a sport can be. And as Americans need the storytelling, they need the little bit of drama in order to embrace it. And I think Drive to Survive is doing exactly that for Formula One.
Yeah. And when you joined Salesforce, do you feel like Salesforce was too slow paced compared to what you were sort of exposed to in Formula One, like aggressive racing, or you think you sort of gelled with the culture when you joined?
In some ways, it actually moves faster than Formula One. It's amazing to see how this company has grown. I mean, I joined Salesforce in early 2011. We were like 3,000 employees, and here we are, 80,000 employees. I find myself in a very interesting role where, we're doing 50 keynotes a year and everything's changing last second, and it's very high paced. So in some ways, it does feel a little very, very similar, actually. The danger is a little different, I will say. But overall, it's very similar. And I think there's a reason you see so many professional athletes go into marketing, because there's so many similarities of personal brand development, operating in a high-paced environment, really thinking about the product market fit, so to speak, for a motorsports career or any type of athlete. There's so many similarities, and you look at like Nick Drake at Google, another incredible CMO, former CMO of T-Mobile, that is a professional rugby player. There's countless examples of athletes that have transitioned their careers, and marketing seems to be a really good place to do that.
That's awesome, Colin. But the next thing I want to sort of chat about is the Salesforce brand in particular, right? Like I got exposed to Salesforce as a CRM tool, right? And like now Salesforce has become like a giant company with multiple business units, multiple large teams together. Like how are you sort of going through that challenge of like integrating Salesforce to a larger story, because it's more than CRM, right? Like how are you tackling that challenge from your brand narrative at Salesforce?
Well, I think it's an awesome opportunity to think about, we're a behind the scenes technology, right? We are like if the Intel inside is the scenario, you all interact with Salesforce every single day. Cyber Week, for example, runs on Salesforce, and most people would never know it. And I think that's an interesting marketing challenge. And how do you surface that, right? How do you bring that to life? And so one of the things we've tried to do as a company is trying to show up a little bit more of a consumer grade work. And so think about the values of the company, think about where we focus our efforts. In fact, the thing that I'm perhaps most proud about for Salesforce is it would be easy for us to turn into Microsoft and say we are in ERP in every category known to humanity, because we're operating at that size and scale now, but we stayed focused on one most important thing, and that's the word customer. And that's so important for us that we think it is the shared commonality across every business, which is we all focus on our customers, right? You know this.
Yeah.
And that's where we focus, and that is our bread and butter. That is our entirety of our focus. And it makes the marketing a little easier when you can shine a light on one simple, most important thing. We call ourselves the customer company. It is literally all we do. And it is something that I find liberating in a way that you can get a chance to tell a story. And there's so much rich storytelling that comes when you think about customer relationships. You know, there's the opposite true, the 1-800 number, you get put on hold for 5 hours. The opposite side is true. But when you have those incredible experiences with Amazon or any of these incredible customers of ours, it makes you think differently about those companies.
Yeah.
And we want to be the company that's powering those experiences. And I think that that's really an open book in terms of how we tell that story. And I'm pretty excited about the potential, not only now, but of course going forward as well.
Yeah. Can you double down on that customer story? Because a lot of companies, including us, right? What we do with customers is that we do case studies, we do like testimonials, we probably bring them on events, right? And we want to do more with them, but we still want like creative ideas to like, how do we showcase our customers more? Like, would love to hear from you directly on like, how do you double down on customers through the brand initiatives you work on?
Yeah. You know, I think we are one of the most active customer marketing organizations in the world, probably at least in our industry. I've got nearly 100-person customer marketing team that really just focuses on making sure we've got incredible success stories for every industry segment you can imagine, right? And I think a couple of things that have happened over the years in my time at the company that have really transformed. We went from a CRM company, as you mentioned, like we manage our sales teams through Salesforce, to now being the CEO's transformation agenda. And so when we talk to, Jim Farley at Ford as an example, he doesn't say, oh, we're running our sales team on Salesforce. He goes, I'm transforming the business with Salesforce. And that is such a different altitude of story to tell. It's just awesome to see, transformation agendas and the opportunity to do big, bold transformation stories in a way. So the category has evolved along the way. Something else that we've done, which I'm really interested in and proud of, is we started to do more documentary storytelling with their customers. So for example, we did a Trailblazer series on Salesforce Plus that allows us to talk about the personal and career development and transformation stories of individuals. Aaron McGriff went from X to now a very senior executive at Slalom. And I think there's incredible organizations and people that have adopted this Trailblazer mentality and have done really interesting things. Last thing I would share is telling stories in a more documentary style way. You talked about Drive to Survive. We took the stories of Formula One and Pandora and Carvana and all these amazing companies and documented their transformation journey from spreadsheets to Salesforce, and really looked at what we were honest with ourselves. We're like, what's really hard about this transformation? What are the things that people struggle with? And how do we highlight the tough stuff, not just the magical stuff? And so there's a series we produced with CNBC called The Shift. And it's almost like a bar rescue show of digital transformation, and finding new and interesting ways to tell stories is where I find a lot of enjoyment personally.
Yeah. And then on that question, I think this comment by Kelly is fair. Colin, like this has become like a larger narrative for a lot of companies. Like, how do you think like a media company, right? I've seen HubSpot taking a lot of moves in this. You guys have obviously pioneered this segment a long time back. Do you think investments in what you mentioned, like the brand storytelling, has brought down CAC? Like, have you sort of like looked at it like, hey, this actually brings down CAC instead of, spending on Google search, etc. Like, have you done any sort of math around it?
We've certainly looked at it a lot. And I will tell you a couple things. One is, the idea of looking at marketing at different layers of the funnel is always going to be important. Like Google search words, you want to be there, you want to capture the moment. SEO is critically important. But when you look at overall market of a software purchase, roughly 95% of the people within that market are not in a buying cycle of CRM at this moment, right? We think there's only roughly 5% of those people that are actually ready to buy at that given moment. So you have to have marketing that looks at both of those perspectives. We're really good at the 5%. If you're in the market to buy CRM, we're going to be in front of you, and we're incredibly good at that.
Right.
What we've gotten better at and where we focus is that 95%, so that when somebody decides, okay, I'm ready to buy a CRM, or I'm ready to think about my customers a little differently, we're the first brand that comes to mind. And how we do that is more helpful content. It's more media-based things. We're helping their own career development, how to think about solving problems, how-to content that is kind of adjacent to our field. And so I do think that 95-5 rule we talk about a little bit about from the B2B Institute and LinkedIn is something that we look at a lot. Is like my team focuses on the 95%. And that doesn't mean I get a direct attribution for everything that I do every minute of the day. But we know the leading indicators. And if I can make that 95, 85, and we move 10% more buyers into the buying environment, that's worth a lot of money for a company like Salesforce. And so how do we think about shifting the dynamics in what we call relevant awareness, so that when people think about our relevant category, we're part of that initial consideration set. And we feel pretty good about when we're in that initial consideration set, we're going to win that deal.
Yeah. So, and then on this point about the relevant awareness, Colin, do you guys measure that across all different categories like CRM, Service Cloud, right? And then see where you want to make some bets on for next year? Is it how you sort of figure out where to, push your investments into? Is it? Yeah.
Very much so. I mean, this is one of those things that, serendipitous moments. But when I joined our creative team about 6 years ago now, which is crazy to think about, by the way, the first thing I did was a brand study. I'm like, I just need to know where we are. And something became very clear to me, which was Salesforce had built a brand that people are aware of. And I'm really proud of that. Our aided awareness is in the 90th percentile, and we feel really good about that. That's hard to do. And a lot of companies would kill for that.
Yeah.
But when you ask the second question of like, okay, Salesforce, but what do they do? That number falls off a cliff. And we had a hard time, and we still do to a degree, articulating what we do. And so that has been my sort of charter for the last 5 years of this company, is to help reduce that gap. We call it the awareness gap, or the relevant awareness gap, the delta between how they know and if they know what we do. And I think that has been such a great vision and such a great charter for the team to kind of rally around. And so literally every day we think about how do we close that gap. And that can mean content, customer marketing, events, creative, advertising, brand, everything's focused on one charter. And it's easy to do that when you have something, a problem or a pain point to attack. Of course, and I'm proud of the way we've closed that gap. But that gap still exists, and that gap will always exist, and we'll always be chasing that gap. And that has led to what I feel is some of the better marketing in the enterprise, and the opportunity to help really just call a spade. Like, here's what it is. If Salesforce don't know what we do, let's help you understand that. And that's YouTube series and Salesforce Plus and events and all the things we do to help achieve that objective for us.
That's awesome. It's funny. I have Kimberly who has joined us. She has come for a lot of our events, and she used to ask this question constantly, like, how do you actually do a proper brand study and make the right, measure the right metrics? And we have gotten good answers, but I thought I'll definitely ask this question to you, since you are the right person to answer this. So how do you conduct a brand study, and what did it include? So high level thoughts.
Well, there's the narrative of there's no perfect in public speaking, and there's no perfect in brand measurement. I think the key thing here is it moves slowly. You're looking for trends, not individual data points. You're looking for things that you connect the dots. Of course, we do a quarterly brand study where we do brand pulses, and then do bigger studies twice a year that asks a broad decision-making set of understanding of the market, really blind studies to help us understand a sample set of the significant margin. We do a pretty traditional brand study, and then we do some technology viewpoints of like, what is more of a digital focused narrative look like? How do we think about pulse studies along the way? But nothing outside the ordinary. The question is, what we've done maybe deeper than I've seen, is we ask ourselves the next question. And if we see a gap in unaided awareness, what can we do? What happens when we increase that by 1%, and do the modeling of basically saying, if I can increase the unaided awareness at Salesforce by 1%, that's worth X amount to the top line, and even more importantly, Y on the bottom line. Yeah. And I think that and the ability to connect rather abstract awareness studies into business performance is something that we focus a lot on. And that's a conversation I can go to my CFO with and say, Amy, 1% here means X amount of millions or even billions of dollars at the bottom line. Can you help me get to that point? That is the mark that all brand marketers need to be thinking about, and a lesson that I've learned the hard way at this company. Yeah. You've got to have a major in brand marketing, but you have a minor in CFO language, because they hold the keys to the castle, and you want to speak on the same language as they do.
Yeah. Because one thing, I don't know if you'd agree with me, is that if you look at the last decade, right, like it's definitely easier to start a SaaS company. Right, like you have AWS cloud, right? You can start a company, put together a product, put together a website, etc. Right, and there are so many SaaS companies in every category, right? It's obviously like gotten to a point where buyers are feeling like, oh my god, like there's so many companies I have to evaluate.
Yeah.
So I think what, and you might agree with this, what is happening is that people have a perception of what to buy before they even actually come to the website, right? Even in
Yeah.
taking a demo, like, if CRM, it's Salesforce, right? Like there is probably like the second option is
We
probably
hope
so
so.
hard, right? So and that obviously means that you have to make investments in brand, but also this contradicts the fact that it's not a short-term investment. You have to play the long game, right? Like how do you sort of deal with that inside your company like Salesforce, where it's so publicly, the results are so publicly available, you get so much scrutiny from Wall Street, right? Like, how do you play that dynamic inside the company and push the team to make the long-term calls?
Yeah, I think, it's a question of balance, right? You got to do both sides of that really good. You got to be there for the short term and understand the rapid fire. But I think don't hold me to these exact statistics, but roughly when somebody enters a B2B decision-making journey to buy software, or any SaaS software, 67% of the time they already have a brand in mind. So it's already some part of that initial consideration set. 94% of the time they purchase that first brand that came to mind. So if you're not part of that initial consideration set, the deal might already be lost. Before you even go to your website, you may have lost that deal.
Right.
And I think bringing that to light inside an organization, any SaaS company, is incredibly important. And how do you make sure that upon a relevant awareness that you're part of that initial conversation is hard to do, and you need to stand out, right? You've got to zig when everybody's zagging in the phrase. And I think that's something that Salesforce has started the company with, and now we still remain focused on. How do I maintain my differentiation? How do I appear focused as an organization? And how do I make sure my product and distribution organization is incredibly focused on making those customers successful along the way? For me, those three things add up to be something really meaningful for the brand. And it's not that, my team owns the brand or anybody owns these events or anything like that. We do it as one fell swoop, and I think we're all kind of play in the same focused area, and if we do it right, we think the results will speak for themselves.
Makes sense. Colin, I want to sort of chat about Salesforce Plus, right? Which is something that you guys started with, and I think you sort of it's your baby. So one thing that was fascinating to me was that you guys sort of built it in house, right? Like you didn't sort of use an external platform, but you sort of build it in house, and that becomes like a key component for Dreamforce to stream, and also for all your other content, right? Like whatever documentaries you produce, it lives on Salesforce Plus. Curious to hear, since you've sort of done it for a couple of years now, what content is working and what is not working, and is there any learnings from there that you are trying to incorporate next year as you are sort of consuming content in the digital world?
Huge learnings, and I'm sure you've gone through this yourself as well, but huge learnings. Of course, Salesforce Plus was an idea that came out during the middle of the pandemic, of just like we pivoted really quickly during the pandemic to, we can't do events. Salesforce is known as an events company that might just sell software on the side. It is our core focus, right? In so many ways, or at least a huge part of our go-to-market motion. And when those went away, we had to innovate, and we couldn't just sit still. And so we started producing helpful content that sort of made sense for that moment, helping people lead through change, helping people understand the market environment through expertise that lived within Salesforce and outside of Salesforce. But then when we started to be able to have in-person events again, we sort of asked ourselves the question, how do we not just go back to where we were in 2019? And how do we think about what this looks like? And in true Salesforce fashion, we've always looking at consumer grade mentalities or consumer analogies. And we looked at, Netflix, we looked at Peloton, companies that had been crushing it in that moment and still do, and what lessons we can learn from there. And Salesforce Plus was really our idea of how this can come out, learning from the Netflixes and the Pelotons of the world in an enterprise setting. We're just now exiting what we're calling the sort of pilot season, where we went out and tried a bunch of different things. We tried value first content. We tried helpful how-to content. We tried CRM stuff, non-CRM stuff, buyer specific content. We produced over 15 different original series last year. And so I do think we're learning along the way. There's a couple of things that stand out. One, you need a Hamilton moment. You need your big moment. You need your big events. Just like Disney Plus launched with Hamilton, we launched Salesforce Plus with Dreamforce. That is our big brand of the year. And so we found a way to do that. The second thing is the duration and the attention span of people is far shorter than it ever used to be. We used to produce, all of our breakout sessions are 30 minutes. it's now 11 minutes is average duration of a period of content. In fact, if I were to have my way, we'd probably be half that. So I do think that we're learning a lot along the way. We're exiting pilot season. We just cut six episodes, 6 seasons, and 6 shows that we were playing. We love, but we had to ask ourselves the hard questions, and is this right for us? And so we're learning. We're learning from it. In terms of building it in-house, I think we wanted it to be the best use case of Salesforce on Salesforce. And so my CDP is deeply wired into Salesforce Plus. I understand every viewer on there and what behavior they might look like, and help shape the content, things like that. So I think there's lots of learnings there, and we're pretty proud of what we've done, but we know we're just getting started.
Interesting. Colin, it's funny. So I wanted to come to Dreamforce this year, but I felt like, the tickets are expensive. I'll probably like stay at home and sort of watch these sessions on demand. So I got a chance to catch Lydian, who's the current CEO of Slack. She was doing a keynote in Marketing Cloud. So I watched the sessions on demand. Do you think, a slight tangent perspective, do you think there is this common notion that if you have like a on-demand or a hybrid component to live stream in-person events, right, the attendance might go down of the actual in-person events, right? But you guys had like a pretty good turnout this year for Dreamforce. Do you see, like, do you think the notion is right, or do you think no, people who want to watch online will watch online? There is no stopping them from doing it. So, what's your?
Yeah, I think we look at it a little different perspective. They're not either or. So, for example, if you take the Warriors, I'm a big Warriors fan, and you don't call it a hybrid basketball game because they debut it on TV and they go in person. It's a different experience.
Right.
Sometimes you want to go in person because you get that vibe, but it's not a great viewing experience. It's better to watch it on TV anyway. So you have both. You offer both. And for me, Dreamforce is we call it our family reunion. It is an all-conquering, amazing experience for people, and we expect that to be always the case. And there was always people internally that were suggesting this is going to cannibalize your in-person attendance. I think we've pretty strongly proven that has not been the case with as many people we had on site at Dreamforce this year. But what's happening, and I find this to be really fascinating, is we've opened up the entire globe to Dreamforce. At Dreamforce, before the pandemic, we'd have 20 to 30 different countries represented at Dreamforce, and that was already a very global event. This past year, we had 115 different countries watch it on Salesforce Plus. And so we've really reduced the barrier to entry for Dreamforce. Not everybody can fly to San Francisco, but how do we expose Dreamforce to a much bigger audience? And our pipeline associated with the events, the attendance, have all just gone crazy as a result of just opening up to a broader subset of people. And some choose to be in person for it, and we cater to those. And some people watch on Salesforce Plus. But for me, it's less about cannibalization, about how do you deliver the content where people are at that very moment, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And we have this question that our customers ask constantly: "Hey, what if I have a virtual component? Do you think it'll affect the in-person audience?" And our response, we are doing some studies to confirm that, but our response has always been, we have technically seen if people want to come to in-person, they'll come in person, right? It's a different experience, right? And digital is a completely different experience. You can never replicate that in-person experience of sorts, but it does help to deliver content at scale, which you guys have sort of proven successfully. So that's kudos to you for sort of.
We are just in inning one of this, and I think this is a long. And we're watching very closely. What is Netflix doing? What is Masterclass doing? What are these organizations doing? Because it's a very nascent market in terms of everything we're doing here, everything you're doing at Goldcast, and everything we're doing Salesforce Plus. That we have to just continue to learn. And I think the product you make available in person, it has to be different than the digital. It's not a one-to-one mapping.
Yeah.
You have to think about the value exchange there. And for us, the value exchange in person is networking and hands-on experiences, community development, things like this. It's not an either or. I think you can do both.
Exactly. Cool. This is one question I want to take from Kelly. This is Salesforce is amazing. I'm curious about the on-demand view behavior. Oftentimes, on-demand content just sits on the shelf and dies. How do you make sure that the content gets the right level of role and promotion at SFTC?
It's one of the things I don't think we've fully nailed, Kelly. I think it's one of the things that we're learning along the way. One is we used to have a pretty big spike, right? We'd have Dreamforce or one of our World Tour events or any of our major events, and we'd have massive popularity of those, and then it would go really quiet for months on end sometimes. For us, the on-demand content has allowed us to maintain the magic. So for now, Dreamforce goes like this, but it doesn't go back to where it was. It stays at a certain level where people are coming back to the content. And we're doing that through cross-promotion and merchandising content in an interesting way. So we have a great breakout session from, Lidiane Jones, as you mentioned. How do we chunk that up and do digestible social pieces that drive people back to Salesforce Plus? How do we think about cross-merchandising that with Slack? How do we think about promoting that on other podcasts and stuff like this? And really thinking about the asset or the series or the show is not the promoted piece, it's the content. And how do you think about surfacing that content in different forms and structures that allows us to kind of get more life out of it? For me, that's really interesting. And then looking at the ratios of how much content are you producing versus your promotional budget behind it, we found that we were really out of whack. We were spending all this money on creating great content, but very little in actually promoting it. So we really looked at that ratio, and something we've been really focused on for the foreseeable future, I think.
Yeah. Hey, what's that ratio like, Colin? Like now, if you guys what's the ideal ratio that you would want to get to? Is it like 60-40 or 70-30, like the actual creating content versus promoting content?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the type of asset. So, for example, it's hard to give an actual number. We do look at, like, for example, a TV commercial. You're going to spend a lot. Right. You're going to be oversized on that, right? Sometimes we're not. Most of the time, we try to be, and put the majority of it on our promotion. For a breakout session or something to that effect, you could argue the cost is relatively lightweight, and so it's all promotion. And so I think it really depends on the piece of content. The one thing that's really important, though, is you look at that perspective and you say, am I creating great content? And I know a lot of marketers focus exclusively on how great do I make this content, but if 43 people see it, it's not giving you the bang for the buck. And so how do you think about the ROI and making sure that you're merchandising it in unique ways, resurfacing it, finding net new ways to promote that content? And if you look at, like, I speak with Nick Thompson, the CEO of the Atlantic, and he's phenomenal. Like, he doesn't think about an article being a product. He thinks about the story being the product, and he writes articles and podcasts and video snippets and things like this around that same topic. And for me, that's the new way of thinking like a media company, and every company needs to be thinking about it in that way as well.
That's awesome. This is another good question from Swati. There was a boom of variety of content when lockdown set in with increased digital connectivity. This brought in a lot of digital fatigue for content consumers post-pandemic world. How is Salesforce trying to stand out and scale?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that we're learning, and I wouldn't say that we're best in class at this yet, but we are learning a lot from our media companies that we sort of watch and have spent some time with. You can't be emotionally tied to anything. So we produced a show during the pandemic called Leading Through Change. And it was a phenomenal hit. And we couldn't imagine how successful it was. And weekly, we just ask really interesting people hard questions about how they're getting through this moment during the depths of the pandemic. And then it came to the point where it was no longer all that relevant. Like, the world had moved on. And we had won award after award after award on the show. And we're like, we can't cut that. It's our baby. But we asked ourselves a hard question. Like, it served its purpose. We have to move on. Yeah. This is why you think about The Office or Friends or the most popular shows in the world. At some point, reached their point where it just didn't make sense any longer. And I think why we call it pilot season with Salesforce Plus. We're cutting shows that I just admire and adore deeply, but we have to move on because the world has moved on and the world has changed. And I think you can't be emotionally tied to content. You've got to move on and make sure that you're capturing the moment. What's happening in 2022 or 23 is different than what happened in 21, and make sure your content is relevant, meets the moments, and answers the questions that are present today. And if your product or whatever show or series or piece of content you're producing doesn't answer this moment now, you got to ask yourself if it's worth doing.
100%. And then a similar question to this. Hey, Colin, how are CFOs viewing brand marketing, which I'm assuming has delayed measurement of regular demand gen and it's riskier as we head into economic uncertainty in 2023?
Yeah. It is the question of all brand marketing in 2022 for sure. And it will be into 23. I don't have all the answers here. I think we're all on our own journeys, clearly. I think there's the good news is we can look back to the history a little bit. When you look at the Great Recession or even the Great Depression, you've seen a historical trend that companies that had outsized investment in brand marketing during those periods came out the other side at a far stronger period than they left. And I do think that we've got to look to those learnings along the way. Now, this economic downturn we find ourselves in now is wildly different than 2008 was, or even to other historic kind of downturns. But there are some truths along the way, and there's a great I'll give a second plug to the B2B Institute with LinkedIn. They do fantastic study and reach there, and Peter Weinberg and the team have done a lot of work that I watch very closely, and just like what lessons can we learn from the past. And this is why I mentioned the brand marketers need to have a major in brand marketing and a minor in CFO. And I do think it's important that you contextualize the work that you're putting out, or your areas of investment in the language that matters to the CFO, who may be focused on short-term, make the quarter mentality right now. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. We've seen and proven over time that brand marketing can make demand gen marketing more effective. That we've seen the 95-5 rule we talked about. We have to make sure that we're ready for people when they make that buying decision. I think that those are the things that brand marketers need to be thinking about and telling that story internally. It's not a moment to go blow a bunch of money on brand marketing that doesn't affect it for the business. That's not what we do. What we can do is make sure that it's smart and connected to our narratives, and it's focused on relevance. For me, Dreamforce, Salesforce Plus, all these things are really focused on doing brand marketing in unique and interesting ways. For example, we have a campaign out right now called Team Earth, and it's with Matthew McConaughey, and it's a very interesting narrative. We built the first effort around it during the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl in 2022 was a very different moment for enterprise software and SaaS than it is right now. Right. We just came out with a second TV spot that follows a similar narrative, because values endure. And we're really good on the demand gen marketing side. If you raise your hand for any interest in CRM, we're going to make sure you know about us. But it's important to win the minds and showcase our values as a company that really cares for the long term. And I think those are the things that we really find that are enduring along the way. And values never go out of style, and I think it's important for us as well.
That's awesome. That makes a lot of sense. Hey, and then for Dreamforce, right? I want to get a sense of how big Dreamforce is. I've always been curious. I know you can't share like the cost and revenue numbers involved in Dreamforce, but any rough sense you can give us of how big that it's like an own, like a living organism within Salesforce, right? Like how big is that? Any rough estimate?
Yeah, I mean, Dreamforce is a business, and we think about it like that in many ways, not as a profit center for us, but as a focused area for success. And it's not just a marketing endeavor. Dreamforce is the ultimate forcing function for all things at Salesforce. For our community, it's a family reunion. We organize this event to make sure that our community has a place to come home to. I think it's a huge business driver for us. And we have, hundreds of millions and billions of dollars walking around Moscone Center for us to make sure that they know what's innovative for Salesforce, what's important. But really, it's the ultimate forcing function for the company. Our product releases, our development cadence, our marketing cadence, our message development, our sales cycles all culminate or begin at Dreamforce. And so for me, it's this old, every sports environment has their Super Bowl or the Daytona 500 or Monaco Grand Prix, or whatever you want to call it. For us, Dreamforce is that place. And it is the ultimate report card for the health of marketing. It is a report card for the company. There's a reason why we have our investor day at Dreamforce, because our investors like to see how vibrant is this community, how important for us is the business, how mission critical is Salesforce to these businesses. And so for me, I love it that it's become more than a user conference. I love that it's become more of a cultural moment for the industry at large. I love that it's become the report card for the health of the experiential marketing industry, maybe. We were the first big conference to go back in 2022. And I tell you, that wasn't always an easy conversation. There was people that told me in the summer of this past year that that's a completely stupid decision to be thinking about Dreamforce again. And here we are. And, for me, it's a humbling moment that I think everything was questioned during the middle of 2021 and I took over the event team, or started leading the event team middle way through the pandemic. And it scared me deeply, because Dreamforce is such a magical thing for not only Salesforce, but for the community and the industry at large. What if I screwed that up? What if the community didn't have the same magic? What if the event didn't have that sparkle that once did? And I tell you what, it woke me up every night nearly. But it just shows the enduring nature of values, the enduring nature of community, the enduring nature of experiences that are always there and present. And we found ways with Salesforce Plus and digital to make it even more sparkly, I think. But I'm just thrilled at what we've been able to put together. And I think the story will continuously be written for Dreamforce, but it is the center of gravity for everybody at Salesforce. And so it's a huge 80,000 person effort along the way.
It's funny, Colin. I was looking for Dreamforce GIFs in our GIF thing, and I found a GIF, where you can see the two fighters. right? I mean, there are only few conferences where the CEOs sort of do that, right? So it's a very different experience altogether. So.
Parker was not very happy about that moment. We made him dress up in a suit, but he's a good trooper. And I think we try not to take ourselves too seriously at these events.
Right.
We realize that we try to bring a little cultural moments into it, a little levity.
Right.
Mark and Brett wore bunny ears at Dreamforce this year, and I do think it's a company that has a soul. And I think that that's really, really important. And it is my job, or any marketers, to find a way to capture that soul and turn it into really encouraging and marketing that enables behavior. And I think, that GIF is a great example of just the personality from the company.
Yeah.
I am super fortunate to be able to capture and help tell that story.
Yeah. Colin, I think this is a good question from Pallavi. How is Salesforce rethinking the balance of in-person versus virtual for Dreamforce? And I also have a broader question, actually. How are you guys thinking about events? After some learnings you've had over the last couple of years, is it going to be like one big event with a lot of smaller events, or is it going to be back to normal? Like, what's your sort of vision for the events?
We are very bullish on events, in person and digital, going forward. I think Mark said it the other day. If we're not in front of our customers, somebody else will be. And so how do we, that's the scary thing, right? So how do we make sure that we are front and center? And our audience is so big now. We sell to every C-level executive in the company now. Where it used to be, we would sell to the CRO and maybe the head of service. We sell to everybody now. And so how do we build experiences and an event portfolio that makes sure that they're getting what they need, the level of inspiration, the education at all levels, from practitioners to C-level executives. And so that's what I think about a lot, and my entire team thinks about a lot, is how do we make sure that our portfolio matches that? That can be in-person experiences, digital experiences, or some version there, some hybrid thereof. I think for me, it's a couple things. One is we do think the in-person experience set is here to stay. I think that you cannot replicate one-to-one that experience in a virtual environment. There's benefits to the virtual environment too, and that we need to make sure we're doing that really well. So I think those things stand out to me. How do we make sure that we continue to showcase innovation in interesting ways? These events are more than just a day or 3 days on site with our customers. It is forcing functions for the company as it's really the ultimate forcing function for us to get our stuff together, frankly. And I think that it sits that way for the company, and I'm really proud of the momentum that we've built there. But yeah, it's a spectacle for us. These events are a big part of our go-to-market motion, and we're only investing there. In terms of the balance, I don't really know. I think every year the world throws something different at us. And so I think, we had over 250,000 people register for Salesforce or Dreamforce on Salesforce Plus this past year. Amazing numbers. And we're proud of that. Who knows what next year could look like? The good news is with digital is it can be infinite, essentially. You can't fit that many people on site at Moscone Center in San Francisco, but you can digitally. And so I do think that we're going to be focused on both and making sure we're making the experience worthwhile for anybody that chooses to attend, regardless of how they do.
Yeah. But, I think this point you made, now I think about it more deeply, like the point you made about events are a forcing function, right? I think that's so spot on, especially for large companies where you have to align everyone together on hey, we have to get this done by this particular date, right? Smaller companies can be scrappy and figure out stuff. But you're absolutely right on that point. Now I think about it, it sort of makes
we would not be the company we are without Dreamforce. It is unbelievable. And I would tell you, we've doubled the size of the company since the pandemic. My biggest fear and the biggest effort that we've done this year is we had to go retrain more than half the company on what a Dreamforce is and why it's important.
Right.
Unbelievable internal marketing to say, hey, this is important. I know you haven't been there before, but let me tell you how big this is. And I think that was a huge motion for us. And I spent more time marketing internally, it seems like, than I did externally.
Right. That's awesome. Cool. And one sort of final question before I end. Right. I know next year is going to be a tough year. Like, how do you, A, what's keeping you up at night, right? And B, how are you thinking about sort of motivating your team, right? When layoffs are happening, I'm sure people are worried about all this stuff, right? Like what's your sort of leadership style to get sort of folks bought into what you're doing as a leader? Would love to hear your thoughts.
A couple of things come to mind. One is the phrase from my boss, who I'll plug here, Sarah Franklin, clear is kind. I do think there's a lot of uncertainty in the world right now, and nobody would profess to know exactly what the world will look like 6 months from now or a year from now. But what we can do is be clear. And that's important. Like, here's where we are. Here's the fundamentals of the business. Here's where we are as a company. Here's where we're focused. That's really important. So I think clarity is the most important part. And the second part of it is when in tough times like this, whether they be economic or otherwise, it's important to go back to your basics and get your fundamentals right. And so I was just, this is actually not place, but I was actually just reading a book that Mark wrote from Behind the Cloud called Behind the Cloud from 2008. Right. And there are so many truths in here that talk about the fundamentals of Salesforce. And for me, it was just kind of re-educating myself on the different plays associated with it and where we should be focused. And that's spending time with our customers, making sure our product is better than ever, make sure our messaging is clear and is relevant in the moment. And I think if that's where I have my team focused right now, is just back to basics, clarity, blocking and tackling, make sure that we're doing the right things for this moment. And, I think the fundamentals of our business and our industry are very, very strong, and making sure that we're focused in the right places. And I think that's all we can do. I can't control the economy. What we can do as a collective function is make sure we control what we're doing and make sure it's relevant for this moment in time. And so, there's a lot of back to basics campaigns happening right now, cost savings, value, efficiency, things like this. And those are important. And that's what the market wants from us right now. And so that's exactly what we'll do.
Awesome. No, Colin, it's been a pleasure to have you here. I have sort of learned a lot, and like I said, I still say this: if there is one company I'd work for apart from Goldcast, it's Salesforce, and I've always been admired of how.
We'll have to have you by the office. We'll show you around.
I know it's amazing, like how many bets you guys take at such a large company of its scale. Like whatever Wall Street can say, they can say. But if you look at the 10-year returns of Salesforce, right, you guys have come a long way, and it's just incredible the scale you have sort of done things at. So always something that we all startups look to aspire for. But thanks for spending some time with us. We really appreciate it.
The pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I look forward to spending more time. Please let me know when you're up in San Francisco. We'll have you by the office. We'll show you a little behind the scenes as well.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, cheers, everybody.